Every night, my mother would coat my entire body with honey. Soon, the sound of fluttering wings would come from outside the door. Then, tens of thousands of butterflies would burst through the door and instantly cover my entire body. Ever since then, no matter where I went, I would be surrounded by butterflies. Such a wondrous spectacle soon caught the attention of many powerful figures, including Pei Yunhe, who was still the crown prince at the time. Relying on this unique fragrance and the empress's affection, I became Pei Yunhe's crown princess, and later, his empress. I strictly performed my duties, remained gentle and virtuous, kept the imperial harem in perfect order, and secured his reign and the empire for him, becoming the most exemplary wife and empress in his own words. But it wasn't until the day I died of illness that I finally saw the cold indifference behind this favor. Before I passed away from illness, the court ministers and imperial concubines knelt all over the floor, kowtowing to send me off. Only my husband Pei Yunhe, whom I wed in our youth, did not come, just because his beloved consort Shu had lost her kitten and was crying her heart out. He, the dignified ruler of a nation, for the sake of his beloved, personally went to search for the cat. The cat was found, but it was injured. The moment before I drew my last breath, Pei Yunhe was still watching over the imperial physicians treating the cat. He merely had a eunuch deliver 2 sentences to me.
You have always been a fitting wife and empress. If there is a next life, we would still choose you. Depart in peace. We will personally oversee your funeral.
Noble consort Cui Luoyao, who had fought with me my entire life, scoffed at me with disdain.
You are too soft-hearted. In the next life, do not be the empress again. Let me do it instead.
I did not expect her words to actually come true. When I opened my eyes again, we had both returned to the day Pei Yunhe was choosing his crown princess. The empress pointed at me affectionately, asking for Pei Yunhe's opinion, but I pushed Cui Luoyao forward. Your Highness, the position of crown princess is more suited for Lady Cui. The empress hesitated slightly, because Cui Luoyao came from a family of military generals, and her temperament was exceptionally fiery. Meanwhile, my Jiang family had been scholars for generations, and our daughters were all remarkably gentle. Compared to Cui Luoyao, I was much easier to control, but Pei Yunhe did not care in the slightest. Anyone could be the crown princess. Indeed, since he could not marry his beloved as his primary wife, didn't it make no difference who it was? Pei Yunhe's beloved was named Liu Mengyun, who became consort Shu in our past life. She was a tavern girl, because she had shared a few drinks with Pei Yunhe during the miserable days of his youth. Pei Yunhe regarded her as his salvation. He loved her deeply, to the point of life and death. Unfortunately, Liu Mengyun's status was too low. The emperor and empress refused to let her be the crown princess. Helpless, Pei Yunhe had no choice but to compromise and accept the emperor and empress's arrangements, forming alliances with the Cui and Jiang families. Seeing Pei Yunhe agree, the empress could not say much more. She turned to look at me and Cui Luoyao, offering the same reminder as in our past life.
You two must reach an understanding. General Cui and Chancellor Jiang are pillars of the court. The Cui and Jiang families must never harbor resentment over a marriage.
I understood the empress's concerns. Since childhood, both Cui Luoyao and I had been fond of Pei Yunhe. Although our upbringing kept us from open conflict, we were constantly at odds in private. In my past life, after Pei Yunhe chose me as his primary consort and Cui Luoyao as his side consort, she vied with me for his favor at every turn. Feigning illness and faking miscarriages were routine for her, but because of my gentle nature, I preferred not to argue with her. Only when things went too far would I offer a few words of reprimand. Now, living this life over again, knowing where Pei Yunhe's heart truly lay, I naturally wouldn't fight with Cui Luoyao over him again. I replied to the empress calmly, "Rest assured, your majesty, Miss Cui and I have already discussed this. We will absolutely not hold a grudge against each other because of this." The empress nodded in satisfaction.
Then I shall have the Ministry of Rites begin preparations for the marriage proposal. In 3 days, the Crown Prince will personally escort the two of you into the Eastern Palace.
I did not refuse, because I knew very well that for the Jiang family to maintain a stable foundation, we had to align ourselves with the Crown Prince. This point, Cui Luoyao also understood. That was why someone as proud as her, who had vowed since childhood never to be a concubine, chose to compromise in her past life and became the crown prince's side consort. Although we both loved Pei Yunhe, before that, we were still the eldest daughters of our respective families. Compared to our families, Pei Yunhe could only rank second. Cui Luoyao and I agreed to the empress's words. Just as we were about to leave, we suddenly heard Pei Yunhe make a request.
Imperial Mother, in 3 days, I would like to marry Mengyun as well.
The empress knew how to avoid impropriety. Since the crown princess had been decided, matters of taking concubines in the future should be decided by Luoyao. Cui Luoyao was different from me. She was used to being straightforward, although she played minor tricks like faking illness in her past life. The moment Pei Yunhe asked, she would honestly admit to it. Moreover, she was not one to shirk responsibility. As long as it was her right, she would exercise it with peace of mind. So, as soon as the empress finished speaking, she asked Pei Yunhe,
It is fine for your highness to marry Lady Liu, but I wonder what status she will hold.
Pei Yunhe said, without hesitation,
Naturally, as a side consort.
In my past life, after I was designated as the Crown Princess, Pei Yunhe had also brought up this matter, thinking that it was the first time Pei Yunhe had ever made a request of me, and not wanting to disappoint him. So I nodded and agreed. Only, back then, we all thought Pei Yunhe wanted to marry Liu Mengyun to repay her kindness. We didn't know she was the one he cherished most in his heart. Nor did we know Liu Mengyun was an incredibly jealous woman, whose fight for favor would eventually alienate everyone in the harem. Cui Luoyao was one of those who became disheartened. After her rebirth, she naturally would not allow such a thing to happen again. She flatly refused.
Ningjin is the Chancellor's daughter, yet she is only to be a consort with Lady Liu's background. If she were to be placed on equal footing with Ningjin, not only would it make us a laughingstock to the world, but it would also easily alienate the Jiang family.
Pei Yunhe was visibly taken aback. Though Cui Luoyao was notoriously fiery, she was exceptionally gentle toward Pei Yunhe. Yet now, the moment she became crown princess, she changed. Pei Yunhe naturally assumed she was someone who lusted after wealth and status. He couldn't help but frown and mock her.
Yao, you are being far too petty. In my eyes, the daughter of a military general is indeed lacking in tenderness and magnanimity. It seems the position of crown princess is more suited for the daughter of a civil official. Jin, what do you think?
That was just how Pei Yunhe was. He didn't care which of us loved him, nor did he care whether our actions made sense. All he wanted was someone obedient and submissive, someone who would tolerate Liu Mengyun and tolerate his outrageous behavior. Looking up, I happened to meet Pei Yunhe's expectant gaze. I understood his meaning. He wanted me to take the initiative to snatch the position of crown princess. That way, even if people criticized the decision, they would be criticizing me. But for the first time, I did not let him manipulate me. Instead, I respectfully lowered my eyes and politely declined. Your Highness's favor is something Ningjin will always keep in mind. However, Lady Cui's words and actions are entirely proper and correct. No one would be able to find any fault. Ningjin is fully convinced and has absolutely no reason to compete. Pei Yunhe shuddered all over, his face turning livid with anger. Yet he was left utterly speechless. The Empress waved her hand wearily.
Enough, Yunhe. I do not care who becomes the primary consort and who becomes the secondary consort. Discuss it among yourselves. I have only one requirement.
The Eastern Palace must form a marriage alliance with both the Cui and Jiang families. After leaving the Empress's palace, neither Cui Luoyao nor I paid any attention to Pei Yunhe, and we each headed back to our respective homes. However, he stopped my carriage at the palace gates, intent on continuing to persuade me to fight for the position of crown princess. Perhaps he was in too much of a hurry, for he did not even care for proper etiquette. With one long stride, he lifted the curtain and stepped inside. I quickly got down from the carriage, lowering my eyes demurely as I said, Your Highness, it is inappropriate for men and women to be in such close contact. If you have anything to say, please speak to me like this. Pei Yunhe held up the carriage curtain with one hand, his brow furrowing deeply in frustration.
Jin, what on earth is wrong with you today? In the past, whenever I was ill or injured, you were always the one to personally care for me. How did we become so distant now?
Indeed. My devotion to Pei Yunhe was known to everyone. Since childhood, I had accompanied him without a single regret. He had a weak constitution and fell ill very easily. When I was small, I learned some medicine from the imperial physicians, just so I could take care of him. Later, during the struggle for the succession among the three princes, he survived countless assassination attempts, whether his injuries were minor or severe. I was always by his side, never even undressing to sleep. My mother worried about my reputation and advised me against it many times. But in my heart, how could my reputation compare to his safety? My mother would always shake her head helplessly, saying I was too stubborn, saying that even if Pei Yunhe abandoned me in the future, my soul would probably still be reluctant to leave him. I used to think so, too, until the disappointments of my past life accumulated to the peak. Only then did I realize, no matter how deeply you love someone, you can still let them go. Your Highness, in the past, it was Ningjin who did not know her boundaries and ruined Your Highness's reputation. Now that I have come to my senses, I must naturally avoid suspicion. For Your Highness's sake, a flash of pain crossed Pei Yunhe's eyes. He wanted to say more, but his personal guard rushed over and whispered,
Your Highness, this is bad. Miss Liu heard about what happened today. In a fit of anger, she stopped Miss Cui's carriage and said some provocative words. Miss Cui was furious and is preparing to punish her.
Pei Yunhe was instantly enraged, blurting out,
How insolent.
I thought he was talking about Liu Mengyun, but I didn't expect his next words to fully demonstrate his favoritism. Cui Luoyao comes from a prestigious family after all. How can she punish someone over just a few words? He is truly arrogant, domineering, and completely useless. It was the same in my past life, no matter whose fault it was. Pei Yunhe would always side with Liu Mengyun, unconditionally. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Cui Luoyao, and sorry for my past self. And because of this sympathy, I suddenly changed my mind. Since we already know it is a fiery pit, why must the two of us jump into it? Watching Pei Yunhe's receding figure, I instructed my maid, Invite both my father and the great general over. Liu Mengyun wasn't entirely stupid. She had stopped Cui Luoyao in a secluded alley, where no outsiders could see. By the time I arrived, Liu Mengyun was sitting on the muddy ground, burying her head in Pei Yunhe's arms, weeping aggrievedly. Cui Luoyao sat on her horse holding a leather whip, looking down on this pair of lovers from above, her eyes full of disdain. With Pei Yunhe present, Liu Mengyun put on that harmless act again. She sobbed, "Your Highness." The guard's message was distorted. I did not provoke Miss Cui. I only stopped her because I wanted to beg her to give me a chance to be with Your Highness. Your Highness also knows how vain my father is. He said if I cannot become the Crown Prince's consort, I would be better off marrying a merchant as his primary wife. If Miss Cui does not agree, then Mengyun can only part with Your Highness no matter how much it hurts. Pei Yunhe, his face was filled with pain. He kissed Liu Mengyun's forehead as if no one else was around and said,
No, I will never part with you, nor will I ever let anyone bully you.
Hearing Pei Yunhe's words, Cui Luoyao could not help but sneer.
Your Highness has not once asked what happened since arriving here. How can you be so sure that I was the one who bullied her?
Pei Yunhe said disdainfully.
Fine, go ahead and speak. I am listening.
Seeing that Pei Yunhe still possessed a sliver of reason, Cui Luoyao's expression softened slightly.
Your Highness, this Liu woman stopped my carriage and was aggressive the entire time. She claimed that the only one Your Highness loves is her. That Ningjin and I are both shameless freeloaders who throw ourselves at you. And she even said that sooner or later, she will replace us.
Nonsense.
Before Cui Luoyao could finish, she was sharply interrupted by Pei Yunhe.
Mengyun would never say such things. I have known her for many years and understand her best. She never covets wealth or status, nor is she someone who makes wild boasts. In my eyes, you are simply jealous, deliberately sowing discord between Mengyun and me.
In the past, because of my generosity and tolerance, Liu Mengyun used to have things easy, so she was never this sharp and aggressive. She only used minor tricks to compete for favor. Cui Luoyao, of course, had never realized that Pei Yunhe could be so blind to right and wrong. She froze on the spot, momentarily at a loss for how to refute him. Seeing this, I stepped forward at the right moment. Your Highness, Luoyao was raised personally by General Cui. General Cui's character is known to all under heaven. What Luoyao said is certainly not a fabricated slander. That Your Highness favors Miss Liu, we both understand, but there is really no need to brand Luoyao as a jealous woman. But Pei Yunhe was in the heat of anger, and his heart ached for the weeping Liu Mengyun. So how could he listen to reason? His face grew even darker, and he targeted me along with her.
Jiang Ningjin, don't act like you're so considerate. You and Cui Luoyao have never gotten along. Now you speak up for her. Isn't it also because you are jealous that Mengyun has won our heart? We originally thought you were sensible and suitable to be the crown princess, but looking at it now, you are just as narrow-minded as Cui Luoyao and completely unworthy to be the crown princess.
Neither angry nor annoyed, I calmly said, then does Your Highness believe that only Liu Mengyun is worthy of the position of crown princess? Pei Yunhe snorted coldly and said,
Of course, if not for the coercion of our father and mother, we would surely have spent our entire life with Mengyun as an inseparable pair. Why would we reluctantly marry you two? You two remember this well. If you make Mengyun cry again in the future, we will never let you off.
With that, Pei Yunhe picked up Liu Mengyun in his arms and left without looking back. With a bitter smile, I asked Cui Luoyao, do you still want to be the crown princess and the empress? Before Cui Luoyao could answer, two figures stepped out from around the corner. General Cui was so angry that his beard and eyes bulged, and he said in a rough voice,
We're not doing it anymore. If His Majesty hadn't begged for this alliance, I would never be willing to let my most precious daughter marry into the palace and suffer.
General Cui had the temper of a military man, always fiery and impetuous, whereas my father was much more steady and composed. He dissuaded him, saying,
Brother Cui, watch your words, since we have already agreed to the marriage alliance. If we go back on our word now, it would be the crime of deceiving the emperor.
General Cui said in exasperation.
Brother Jiang, you really are broad-minded. You also saw how that Lady Liu put on an act just now. She will definitely frame our daughters in the future. Are you really willing to let your daughter go and suffer?
My father patted General Cui on the shoulder and comforted him, saying,
Brother Cui, do not worry. I love my daughter as much as you love yours. But the crime of deceiving the emperor is no small matter either. We must think of a way that satisfies both sides.
General Cui and Cui Luoyao said in unison.
What way?
I had been taught by my father since childhood, so I knew his mind inside out. As soon as his eyebrows moved, I knew what his idea was, so I spoke for him. Luoyao, don't we both have a troublesome younger sister? They've been full of schemes since they were children. Dealing with Lady Liu would be child's play for them. My mother passed away early, and my younger sister was born to the second wife. In name, she was also considered a legitimate daughter, so marrying her off would not be considered insulting the imperial family. More importantly, in order to climb the social ladder, My sister had tried every means to suppress me, making the household utterly restless. My father had a major headache because of this. If she could marry in my place, it would not only protect me, but also fulfill her wish, and maybe the household will finally have some peace. As for Cui Luoyao's younger sister, she was indeed born of the same mother, but she was highly scheming, and had done all sorts of wicked things. The Cui couple had never liked her, and wished for nothing more than to marry her off as soon as possible. Unfortunately, because of her notorious reputation, no one had ever dared to marry her. After hearing my words, General Cui's eyes lit up. Clapping his hands, he said,
Great idea. His Majesty and the Empress only said that our two families must marry our daughters into the Eastern Palace, but they never specified which daughter, so this cannot be considered deceiving the Emperor. This is a good idea, but neither of our sisters is willing to be subordinate to the other, so who should be the primary consort?
The three of them looked at me together, waiting for me to make the decision. I smiled calmly and said, since neither is willing to yield, why not have both of them be side consorts? We will leave the position of primary consort to Lady Liu. As for whether she can secure her position, that will depend entirely on her own abilities. Once the decision was made, the two fathers went home to prepare. I, on the other hand, went with Cui Luoyao to the Crown Prince's estate. When Pei Yunhe heard that we were there to apologize, he was overjoyed, not wanting to hear his high-sounding praise. I cut him off and said, Your Highness, after this incident, both of us now understand Lady Liu's importance in Your Highness's heart. Therefore, the daughters of the Cui and Jiang families are willing to both serve as side consorts. Pei Yunhe was completely stunned. It took him a long while to recover, asking in disbelief.
Really?
I nodded firmly. But since this concerns our family's reputation, we hope Your Highness will grant us one request, Pei Yunhe said eagerly.
Please, speak your mind.
Since they are marrying as side consorts,
There is no need for the Ministry of Rites to send formal betrothal gifts.
to avoid becoming a laughingstock, 3 days from now, Your Highness can come directly to escort the brides. We can exchange the marriage certificates during the wedding ceremony. Pei Yunhe agreed without any hesitation. 3 days later, in the early morning, Cui Luoyao and I stood side by side on the street. We watched as Pei Yunhe, leading 3 bridal sedans, headed toward the Eastern Palace with a beaming smile. Cui Luoyao stared intently at Pei Yunhe, is retreating back, and asked curiously,
Ningjin, do you think in this lifetime, the Crown Prince and Lady Liu can still have everything go their way?
As soon as she finished speaking, dark clouds suddenly covered the sky, and large raindrops began to fall without warning. I opened an oiled paper umbrella and smiled gently. Luoyao, the weather is changing. Cui Luoyao took my arm, and the two of us squeezed under the small oiled paper umbrella. Yet we felt an inexplicable sense of peace. Cui Luoyao smiled and said,
Jin, do you still remember the first time in our past life that we shared an umbrella?
I nodded and recalled calmly, of course I remember. It was the 2nd month after we married into the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince was staying the night in my room. In order to vie for his favor, you ran out into the heavy rain to get drenched, hoping to use a cold to draw him away from me. After the maid told me about it, I went out to find you. I held the umbrella over you, but you accused me of being a hypocrite. Cui Luoyao scratched her head in embarrassment.
Back then, I was truly blinded by jealousy. I thought since we were of equal status, why did you get to be the primary consort?
Seeing the raindrops falling on her shoulder, I tilted the umbrella toward her a bit more. Cui Luoyao looked at the tilted umbrella, and her voice suddenly cracked a little.
Jin, that time, you did just as you did today. Let yourself get half soaked for me, but I never even noticed. Not only did I not hold back, I even spent my whole life fighting you, with everything I had. Thinking about it now, I was truly foolish.
I couldn't help but laugh out loud. If I told you the truth, you would feel even more foolish. Do you want to hear it? Cui Luoyao nodded without hesitation.
I've already been foolish for a lifetime anyway. What is there to fear?
Only then did I speak. Actually, the Crown Prince didn't stay in my room that night. You went to the wrong person and cried to the wrong person. As for this matter, I had never told Cui Luoyao before. In my past life, Liu Mengyun entered the palace with us, but Pei Yunhe was afraid that favoring her too much would bring her the jealousy of the harem and the censure of the Empress Dowager. So he begged me to act as their shield. He even knelt before me, his eyes red as he said to me,
Jin, you are the most sensible, and you are the most generous. Mengyun is so frail, and cannot bear any grievances. Please help me. I swear that in the future, except for my heart, I will give you everything.
Everyone thought he stayed in my room every night, not knowing that every time after the lights were blown out, he would quietly slip out of the back window and travel through the night to accompany Liu Mengyun. The reason I was willing to help him was because I truly loved him back then, and also to secure my position in the Eastern Palace and serve as a strong support for my family. So I chose to swallow my pride, bearing the reputation of holding his exclusive favor, as well as the overt and covert attacks from you and the other women in the harem. I too had once hoped that my generosity and sacrifice would make Pei Yunhe realize my worth and turn back to look at me. But in the end, it was nothing but an empty dream. It wasn't until I was on my deathbed that he didn't even come to see me once. He only sent a half-hearted, indifferent message.
You have done well.
After Cui Luoyao heard my words, her spine stiffened, and she looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her tears instantly welled up and burst forth, sliding down her cheeks. Her throat choked up for a long moment, before she finally managed to squeeze out a hoarse voice.
I'm sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know you had suffered such great grievances.
I calmly held her hand. Yeah, there is no need to say sorry. Before I died, you were able to cast aside our past grudges and stay by my bedside to keep me company. With that, I already knew that you never truly hated me. We were both just poor souls, trapped by that man and that imperial city. Only then did Cui Luoyao wipe the corners of her eyes, take a deep breath, and once again recovered the cheerful nature of a general's daughter.
All right, let's let the past be the past. In this lifetime, neither of us owes the other anything. Ajin, what are your plans next? What about the Duke of Qin's estate?
I looked at the gradually stopping rain, a genuine smile playing on the corners of my lips. Yesterday, my father already took me to have a matchmaking meeting with Qin Muchen, the eldest young master of the Duke of Qin's estate. Cui Luoyao's eyes widened in surprise, and she grabbed my sleeve.
So fast. How was it? How was it? That Qin Muchen is a famously aloof scholar in the capital. Is he easy to get along with?
In my mind, the scene from yesterday emerged. When I first met Qin Muchen at the Qin family's villa, he was wearing a moon-white robe, standing beneath the green bamboo, his posture as upright as a pine tree. As I walked closer, he put down the book in his hand, his gaze gentle and clear. He wasn't high and mighty like Pei Yunhe. Instead, he gave me a highly courteous bow.
Lady Jiang Muchen knows that this marriage was initially to resolve the difficulties of the Jiang and Qi families.
His voice was as gentle as jade, yet it carried a reassuring strength.
But since Muchen has agreed to it, it is by no means child's play. If you are willing to marry down, Muchen, in this life, will surely not fail your deep affection. I only wish to live in harmony with you, and grow old together.
There was no calculation, no exploitation, only openness and respect. At that moment, this heart of mine, which had been frozen for thousands of years in the deep palace, miraculously felt a slight flutter. I pulled my thoughts back and looked at Cui Luoyao. I think he is very good. I am ready to marry him. This time, it was my turn to be surprised. Upon hearing this, Cui Luoyao immediately beamed with joy, clapped her hands and said,
It seems those two old men really planned this together. My father also arranged a matchmaking meeting for me yesterday. It was with the second grandson of the Duke of Qin, Qin Muchen.
I asked in surprise. You're right. Yes, that guy is practically a block of wood. Although Cui Luoyao complained with her mouth, she couldn't hide the smile in the corners of her eyes. Yesterday during our meeting, without saying another word, he directly drew the sword from his waist and stuffed it into my hands. With a flushed face, he said,
Lady Cui, I am clumsy with words and don't know how to say pretty things. If you marry me, if I ever bully you in the future, you can just take this sword and strike me. Don't you think that is hilarious?
Listening to her, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Qin Muting's blunt and straightforward manner was indeed a perfect match for Cui Luoyao's fiery temperament.
So, we're going to be sisters-in-law in the future.
I teased. Cui Luoyao waved her hand grandly.
All right, since you've agreed to marry him, I might as well marry too. In the future, at the Duke's estate, we can keep each other company and continue to stir up trouble in the Qin family's inner household.
We wasted no time in taking action to prevent any complications from arising. That very afternoon, Chancellor Jiang and Grand General Cui personally took charge. They took us to the Duke of Qin's estate and formally exchanged our birth horoscopes and marriage certificates. With this official, legally binding connection established, even the heavens themselves could not tear us apart. That night, to celebrate the marriage alliance, the three families gathered in the back garden of the Duke's estate for dinner. Cups clinked and toasts were made during the banquet. Qin Muchen sat by my side, constantly putting food in my bowl and pouring soup for me, his gestures incredibly thoughtful and attentive. On the other side, Qin Muting was being pressured to drink by Cui Luoyao. The two of them were even playing drinking games, making the elders burst into hearty laughter. Just amidst this harmonious and joyous atmosphere, the head steward of the Duke's estate suddenly stumbled in to deliver a message, his face deathly pale.
My lords and ladies, the Crown Prince, leading the Eastern Palace Guards, has aggressively charged his way in.
Calculating the time, Pei Yunhe should have been at the Eastern Palace right now, with his beloved darling, Liu Mengyun, and our two younger sisters who had married in our stead, spending their wedding night. The reason I thought this was because on this very day in my past life, Pei Yunhe didn't even bother to lift Cui Luoyao's and my bridal veils, before eagerly rushing into Liu Mengyun's room. We two, wearing our heavy wedding gowns, kept watch in our empty bridal chambers all night long. Only when dawn broke did I receive a casual explanation from Pei Yunhe. He said he was drunk last night and fell asleep after entering a room at random. Naturally, I didn't believe him. Yet, I chose to play deaf and dumb, not exposing him, and even helped him pacify Cui Luoyao, who had also waited all night. Probably because of this, Pei Yunhe became convinced that I was a submissive, easy target, and subsequently used me as a shield with a clear conscience. But this time, I don't know what went wrong, but he actually lifted the veils early, only to find that the brides had been switched. As I was pondering this, Pei Yunhe had already kicked open the main gates of the Duke's estate and strode inside. His eyes were bloodshot, the groom's pure gold crown still on his head, and his bright red wedding robes rustled in the night wind. Behind him followed 3 women, also wearing red wedding gowns. Liu Mengyun, who was pale with fright, and Jiang Ningjin and Cui Luoyao, both looking utterly resentful. He swept a furious glance over us who were dining peacefully, his gaze pinning dead onto Cui Luoyao and me, as he questioned,
Jiang Ningjin, Cui Luoyao, you two have quite some nerve. How dare you have others marry in your stead? What do you take us for? A fool. Fortunately, we felt inclined tonight to test you both first, so we lifted the veils. Switch back immediately. Your younger sisters, we do not like them.
Upon hearing these words, the 2 younger sisters following behind instantly turned extremely pale, terrified that their prize was about to slip away. They cried out in unison. The marriage certificates have already been exchanged at the Eastern Palace. The wedding ceremony is also complete. How can your highness just say you do not want us anymore? Even the royal family has no reason to reject a new bride. Pei Yunhe let out a cold snort of disdain. He did not even bother to spare them a glance.
Do you two really believe your elder sisters genuinely wanted to fulfill your wishes? They are merely throwing a tantrum at me. To put it bluntly, you two are merely bait, yaos to make me regret, and to make me jealous. Once I speak up, they will kick you aside immediately.
Cui Luoyao, the second daughter of the Cui family, had a fiery temper. She glared at Cui Luoyao with resentment, gritting her teeth as she spoke. Eldest sister, is what his highness said true? Is that really what you thought? To make a fool out of me? My stepsister, Jiang Ningjin, was also so furious that her eyes turned red. Sister, I call you sister out of respect. If you are only using me to gain the crown prince's attention, I, Jiang Ningjin, will never let this go. Seeing how ungrateful they were, and how they dared to question her in public, Cui Luoyao's anger flared up instantly. She jumped up, ready to hit them. I held her down firmly and cast a reassuring look at Qin Muchen. Then, I slowly stood up and pulled my 2 younger sisters to a corner of the main hall, looking into their hostile eyes. I spoke in a low, earnest voice. Ayao and I indeed do not like you. You have caused us no shortage of trouble since we were children. But when all is said and done, we are sisters of the same clan. We rise and fall together. If we really wanted to use you as bait, why would we risk committing the crime of deceiving the emperor? And why would we cut off our own retreat? Seeing that they were still half doubting, I pulled out the marriage certificate from my sleeve, which had just been stamped with a bright red seal. I unfolded it before their eyes. Open your eyes and look closely. Open your eyes and take a good look. This is our marriage contract with the Duke of Qin's estate, in black and white, witnessed by heaven and earth. If the 2 of us really wanted to use you to test the crown prince, why would we agree to marry others? The royal family is hard to enter, but is the threshold of the Duke's estate any lower? The 2 of them stared intently at the marriage certificate. Once they confirmed it was genuine, they looked at each other. After a long pause, the hostility in Jiang Ningjin's eyes slowly faded, and she asked tentatively, Sister, are you 2 really going to fulfill our wishes? Do you really no longer love the crown prince? I nodded without hesitation, my gaze as calm as water. Not only will we fulfill your wishes, the Chancellor's manor and the General's manor will also be your greatest backing in the Eastern Palace in the future, protecting you for a lifetime. But on one condition, you must agree to my term. Faced with the temptation of immense wealth and power, the 2 of them nodded vigorously in unison. Sister, tell us. As long as we can secure the positions of consort in the Eastern Palace, let alone one condition, we would agree to 10 or 100. I leaned in close to them, lowering my voice, my tone as cold as ice. No infighting. In the Eastern Palace, you have only one target. Jiang Ningjin was the most quick-witted. Her eyes darted around, and she was the first to realize, her gaze instantly shooting toward Liu Mengyun, who was trembling in the distance. Sister, do you mean Liu Mengyun? I nodded in satisfaction. The crown prince is deeply in love with her and regards her as his life. As long as she is in the Eastern Palace, you will never have a single day of peace. But if she is gone, or if she loses the crown prince's favor and made a grave mistake, with your backgrounds in the prime minister's office and the general's mansion behind you, even if the crown prince is displeased, would he dare not treat you well? The position of crown princess will sooner or later be yours. The 2 of them finally came to a realization. Jiang Ningjin patted her chest, her eyes flashing with excitement and ruthless light. Understood. Don't worry, sister. Dealing with a little fox who acts all weak and innocent is no trouble at all for us. Within the inner chambers, I have 100 ways to make her life worse than death. The key is, you must first find a way to make the crown prince accept us tonight, so that we can rightfully remain in the Eastern Palace. I patted her on the shoulder, to give her some peace of mind. No need to worry. We are well prepared. Tonight, the Crown Prince won't be taking us away tonight. Seeing us whispering in the corner for so long, Pei Yunhe had already lost his patience. He strode over, shoved my 2 younger sisters aside, and urged,
Jin, are you done talking? If you are, hurry and return to the palace with us. Out of respect for your father today, can overlook your crime of making such a scene.
I stood up and firmly shielded my 2 younger sisters behind me. Unhurriedly meeting Pei Yunhe, his possessive gaze, and slowly spoke. Your Highness, the Empress's decree only stated that the Jiang and Qi families must form an alliance with the Eastern Palace, but it did not specify by name who was to be married. Ningjin and Luoyao are also legitimate daughters of the Prime Minister's and General's families. They are skilled in all the arts, so your Highness is not getting the short end of the stick. Furthermore, a few days ago at the Eastern Palace, Ayao and I only told your Highness that the daughters of our 2 families were willing to serve as side consorts together, but we never said with our own mouths that the ones marrying you would be us. Your Highness must have made an assumption and misunderstood. Pei Yunhe's spine stiffened. He frowned deeply, carefully recalling the conversation in the study that day. Indeed, from beginning to end, we had only said the daughters of the Cui and Jiang families. We had not mentioned Ningjin or Luoyao by name at all. For a moment, he found himself completely trapped by the loophole in my words, not knowing how to refute it. But his pride as the Crown Prince, combined with the immense humiliation of being played by a few women, still made him extremely unwilling to back down. He overbearingly raised his voice and said in anger,
So what if I misunderstood? I am the heir to the throne, the future ruler of the realm. I order you to switch back with them this instant. In this land of great Qin, whomever I want must be mine. Insolent.
Before I could even reply, the Duke of Qin, who had been sitting upright in the host's seat, could finally hold back no longer. This elder statesman of 3 reigns, who leaned on a dragon-headed staff and had hair and beard of pure white, suddenly struck his staff heavily against the floor, making a loud thud that echoed through the room.
What grand authority your Highness displays? Do you intend, right before my eyes, to snatch away the granddaughters-in-law I have just betrothed?
Though the Duke of Qin's voice was aged, it was full of vigor, carrying an imposing majesty that commanded respect without anger. The Duke of Qin had once conquered the realm alongside the late emperor. With the royal golden whip in his hand, he had the authority to strike down corrupt rulers and foolish lords alike. Even the current emperor, upon seeing him, would politely offer him a seat and show him the utmost respect. Pei Yunhe trembled all over at this angry shout. Though he was arrogant, he was no fool. Naturally, he did not dare to openly clash with this top figure of the military. His face turned pale and then flushed with embarrassment. He could only force down his anger, respectfully cupped his hands, and said with a forced smile,
Did your grace mishear me? You are a pillar of our nation who helped found the dynasty. No matter how bold I am, I would never dare snatch someone from you, Elder. I was merely handling the domestic affairs of the Eastern Palace.
The Duke of Qin gave a cold snort and raised his chin slightly. The tall and slender Qin Muchen, along with the spirited and vigorous Qin Muchen, immediately understood. The 2 brothers stepped forward with long strides, shielding Cui Luoyao and me behind them on either side. Then, they drew the 2 gold-stamped marriage certificates from their sleeves and presented them to Pei Yunhe with both hands.
Your Highness, these are our marriage certificates with the young ladies of the Jiang family and the Qi family. They have already been stamped with the official seal of the government matchmaker. Please have a look, Your Highness.
Qin Muchen spoke gently and elegantly, yet his tone carried an uncompromising determination. Pei Yunhe's entire body shuddered violently. He looked down in disbelief. The bright red official and private seals on them felt like a sharp blade, piercing fiercely into his eyes. The next moment, his face contorted in shock, and his body staggered back half a step. He did not dare to question the highly respected Duke of Qin, nor did he dare to take his anger out on the Qin brothers. He could only direct his bloodshot, furious, and bewildered eyes, staring intently at me, who had always had the softest temperament, and had been completely submissive to him.
Jin, have you 2 been planning this all along? Otherwise, why would you be in such a rush to get engaged today? Are you trying to get back at me? Or are you just playing hard to get?
Like an enraged, trapped beast, he growled in a low voice. I met his gaze. I smiled faintly, my tone as warm as a spring breeze, yet as cold as a sharp blade. Your Highness overthinks. Ayao and I have long been in love with the 2 young masters of the Qin family. Our elders also had the intention of forming this alliance long ago. Originally, because of the Empress's decree, and for your sake, Your Highness, we were prepared to painfully let go of this deep affection. But that day, at the palace gates for the sake of Miss Liu. Your Highness personally declared that since you couldn't marry the one you love, it made no difference who became the crown princess. Since in your eyes, Your Highness, we are merely replaceable ornaments, then why should we wrong ourselves and betray the sincere hearts of the young masters of the Qin family? Therefore, we chose our own path once more. I paused for a moment, stepping back with a display of understanding and magnanimity. But it matters not. The Qi and Jiang families have always been loyal and patriotic. The imperial decree cannot be defied. If Your Highness insists on tearing lovers apart and forcing us into the Eastern Palace, then my sister and I will break off the engagements tomorrow. At worst, we will have failed Duke Qin's kindness and ruined our own reputations for the rest of our lives. With these words, I put Pei Yunhe directly on the spot. If he forced us to break the engagements now, it would not only confirm the infamy of snatching other men's wives and bullying meritorious officials, gaining the evil reputation of a tyrant, but would also directly offend the deep and influential Duke Qin's estate, which held sway over half of the civil and military officials in court. For someone still trying to secure his position as crown prince, to him, who urgently needed to win over court officials, it was absolutely a fatal blow. Pei Yunhe's breathing grew extremely heavy. He clenched his teeth tightly, the muscles in his cheeks trembling violently from the sheer exertion. Though he was absolutely fuming with rage, he also knew clearly that tonight's bitter grievance was something he had to swallow. He clenched both fists, his knuckles turning a ghastly, pale white. After a long time, he finally managed to suppress the suffocating frustration and anger that was about to burst forth.
Very well.
Pei Yunhe almost crushed his teeth, squeezing these words out from between them. Since that is the case,
I will not force the matter. I wish you and the young master of the Qin family a long life together.
with a trembling hand, he turned around abruptly and pointed at those who had been standing behind, observing the situation. Jiang Ningjin and Cui Luoyao. He took a deep breath with effort, trying to feign composure to reclaim the last shred of his pathetic dignity.
They are very good as well. The daughters of the prime minister and the general are more than worthy to be my secondary consorts. As long as they behave themselves and serve Mengyun with all their heart, I will certainly not treat them poorly.
I stepped forward, pretending to take the hands of my two younger sisters, and gave them a few words of reluctant advice. Once you enter the Eastern Palace, you will belong to the imperial family. Be prudent in speech and action. Serve the crown prince and consort Liu well, and do not tarnish the reputation of the Jiang and Qi families. In my heart, I could not help but sneer repeatedly. At home, these two could beat a maid half to death over half a bolt of Sichuan brocade, fighting like fierce gamecocks all day long. Once they go to the Eastern Palace, how behaved could they possibly be? Liu Mengyun's good days are officially over. As I saw them off, Pei Yunhe did not say a word. With a dark face, he extremely roughly yanked Liu Mengyun into his carriage and then sped away. My two younger sisters were startled by this rough action. Standing in the cold wind, they watched the carriage disappear into a cloud of dust, their eyes burning with jealousy. Seeing this, I slowly walked over to them, helped Jiang Ningjin adjust her wind-blown cloak, and warned them in a low voice. You too, remember this. Never overestimate your importance in the crown prince's heart, and never underestimate Liu's methods. The crown prince is deeply in love with her, and is extremely biased toward her. You are new to the Eastern Palaces, and your foundation is not yet secure. If you go head-to-head with her, or attack her directly, it will only anger the crown prince. Toward the end, not only will you fail to win his favor, but you might even lose your lives. Looking at their thoughtful faces, I continued to guide them. So, don't worry. To deal with a woman who holds the crown prince's heart, you must take your time and use others to do your dirty work. You must let her make her own mistakes, and let her lose her flawless disguise in front of the crown prince. After hearing this, my two younger sisters seemed to have a sudden realization. They immediately hid the resentment on their faces. Jiang Ningjin adjusted the jewelry on her head, a determined, cold smile playing on her lips.
Don't worry, sister. When it comes to poetry etiquette and the bigger picture, we may not be as good as you two. But when it comes to playing mind games in the inner estate, using underhanded schemes, and even playing dirty, we are the absolute masters. We will make sure Liu Mengyun knows that being a consort of the Eastern Palaces is not that easy.
I smiled calmly, took a half step back. Then I wish you a victorious return. If you face any difficulties that require external assistance, just send word out to us. As long as it doesn't affect the family's reputation, we, your elder sisters, will do our best to help. Although Cui Luoyao, in her heart of hearts, looked down on her half-sister, she still echoed my sentiment, for the sake of the family's greater plan, giving a soft grunt of agreement. Only at this moment did Jiang Ningjin and Cui Luoyao truly realize that Cui Luoyao and I were indeed planning for their benefit. A wave of guilt suddenly washed over them, and lowering their heads, they said in unison,
Sister, for how we acted at home before, we are sorry.
I shook my head and patted them on the shoulders. There is no need to say sorry. We are sisters connected by blood, no matter how much we bickered. In this capital full of schemes and plots, we are still in the same boat. Take good care of yourselves. Staying alive is the most important thing. Watching the bridal carriages of the Eastern Palace take them away and disappear into the night, Cui Luoyao finally let out a long sigh. She turned her head to look at me.
Jin, you are too soft-hearted. How they harmed us at home before. How they drugged us and ruined our reputation. Have you forgotten?
I turned around and walked side by side with Qin Muchen into the Duke's manor, smiling calmly. I haven't forgotten, but their current honor and disgraces are tied to the foundation of the Jiang and Qi families in court. The superficial courtesy we must show and the support we must give must be done thoroughly. Only when they stand firm in the eastern palaces can our two families rest easy. Only then did Cui Luoyao nod.
That is true.
Evil people will be plagued by other evil people. It is just that I don't know if their petty tricks and domestic strife can actually match that scheming Liu Mengyun. You know what? I'm actually quite looking forward to the grand drama in the Eastern Palace. While pulling her along, I said softly, "No rush. The struggles of the inner palaces are never decided in just a day or two. We can just watch it unfold slowly." Life after marriage was unexpectedly peaceful and warm. Qin Muchen truly did as he had promised before the wedding, treating me like a precious treasure. He was not like Pei Yunhe, who used all kinds of red tape to demand that I be a perfect crown princess. On his days off, he would keep me company in the study, keeping the incense burning, as we appreciated rare ancient books together. When I caught a cold, he would stay by my bedside without even undressing to sleep, personally brewing medicine for me. Meanwhile, that bickering couple, Cui Luoyao and Qin Muchen, turned the Duke's manor upside down with their antics. Qin Muchen was a martial arts fanatic, often dragging Cui Luoyao to compete on the martial arts field. When the two got worked up, Cui Luoyao would chase Qin Muchen all over the yard with a red tasseled spear. Not only was Duke Qin not angry, he actually grinned so much his beard curled up, saying this was the exact vitality a family of military generals should have. Here, we enjoyed what we had never experienced in the deep palace in our past lives, the warmth of a real home. Meanwhile, at the Eastern Palace, just as we had expected, it had already turned into a treacherous battlefield. Sure enough, we waited for a year and a half before finally getting a piece of spectacular gossip that made everyone feel thoroughly gratified. It was an early summer afternoon. Qin Muchen returned from the morning court, and as I helped him change his clothes, he lowered his voice and brought shocking news from court.
Jin, something big happened in the Eastern Palace. 2 months ago, the Crown Prince went to Mount Tai to offer sacrifices on behalf of His Majesty. He took consort Liu along, as well as sister Jiang and sister Qi. Who would have thought that along the way, a band of rebels from the former succession struggle would lay an ambush to take the Crown Prince's life?
My hands paused slightly for a moment, and I raised an eyebrow. What was the outcome? A meaningful gleam flashed in Qin Muchen's eyes.
The guards fought hard but were overwhelmed. The Crown Prince was gravely injured. At that critical moment of life and death, it was your sister Jiang Ningjin and Cui Luoyao who stepped forward without a second thought, risking their lives to help him break through the siege, to shield the Crown Prince from a stray arrow. Jiang Ningjin took a hit to the chest, nearly piercing her heart and killing her. As for Cui Luoyao, while fighting the rebels, the tendons in her hand were severed, though both survived. Cui Luoyan's right hand is completely ruined. She can never lift heavy objects again.
I gasped in shock. Those two girls, to win his favor and rise in status, were truly ruthless enough to sacrifice their own bodies. And what about Liu Mengyun? I continued to ask. That is the most critical turning point of this entire play. Qin Muchen sneered, his tone filled with utter disdain.
That consort Liu, who usually vows eternal love and devotion to the Crown Prince, the moment the rebels charged out, was actually scared out of her wits. Not only did she ignore whether the Crown Prince lived or died, but she also ran off entirely alone, to hide in a highly concealed cave amid the chaos. It wasn't until the reinforcements arrived,
and the danger had completely passed, did she finally run out of the cave, throwing herself onto the Crown Prince and weeping hysterically, showering him with concern. At that moment, looking at Jiang Ningjin and Cui Luoyao, who were covered in blood and on the verge of death, and then at Liu Mengyun, who was completely unharmed and doing nothing but crying, the Crown Prince's heart, at that very instant, went completely cold toward her. Qin Muchen said that after returning to the capital from Mount Tai, Pei Yunhe never set foot in Liu Mengyun's room again. Not only did he bestow the most precious tonics from the treasury, like flowing water, upon the two ladies who had risked their lives to save him, but he also took the authority to manage the Eastern Palace, directly away from Liu Mengyun, and handed it to Jiang Ningjin, who had just recovered from her injuries. The relationship between the two of them had hit rock bottom. This matter, after Jiang Ningjin recovered from her injuries and was granted permission to visit her family, she personally recounted to me in vivid detail. Seeing that although her face was pale, her brow was filled with an uncontrollable, triumphant look, I dismissed the servants and personally poured her a cup of hot tea. This band of rebels appeared at such a perfect time. It was your doing, wasn't it? I looked at her with a half smile, softly asking the question I already knew the answer to. The hand Jiang Ningjin held the teacup with paused slightly. Then, she scratched her head in great embarrassment, leaned in close to me, and lowered her voice with a smile. Eldest sister,
You really are as wise as a god. Nothing can be hidden from you. Those weren't remnants of some rival faction at all. It was just Cui Luoyao and me, who pawned all of our dowries and spent a fortune on the black market to hire desperate bandits to pose as them.
Although I was mentally prepared, I was still shocked by their sheer audacity, breaking into a cold sweat. Have you two lost your minds? If those bandits had lost control and cost the crown prince his life, or if you couldn't control the severity of your own injuries, that would be treason, punishable by the execution of your entire clan. Jiang Ningjin waved her hand dismissively, a wild ambition gleaming in her eyes.
Great wealth is found in great danger. Sister, you have no idea what kind of life we've been living in the Eastern Palace this past year. The Crown Prince only has eyes for that woman. When we went to pay our respects, she forced us to kneel in the snow as punishment. Our monthly allowances were docked by her under all sorts of pretexts. If we didn't take drastic measures, we would have been tormented to death by her in the Eastern Palace sooner or later. Those bandits were mercenaries who work for money. They have professional integrity. That sword strike and that arrow wound were both positioned by us in advance, and we threw ourselves into them. Although the pain was worse than death compared to this overwhelming favor and the Crown Prince's guilt, it was absolutely worth it.
I shook my head. This kind of ruthlessness was indeed something Cui Luoyao and I could never have managed in our past lives. Then what about Liu Mengyun? Based on my understanding of her from my past life, although she is selfish, she does have some genuine affection for the Crown Prince. In such a dangerous situation, even if she was terrified, she wouldn't have completely ignored the Crown Prince's life and hidden away by herself, right? I continued to question her. Jiang Ningjin gave me a thumbs up, practically worshipping my insight.
You truly foresee everything like a god. Of course she didn't hide in there herself.
In Jiang Ningjin's eyes, a flash of extremely sinister malice and satisfaction appeared.
It was Cui Luoyao. She had secretly trained a few trusted mercenaries when the bandits charged out, and the chaos was at its peak.
When the scene was at its most chaotic,
the assassins took the opportunity to knock Liu Mengyun unconscious, dragged her away by force, and hid her in that cave using drugs. Once the reinforcements arrived, the assassins finally woke her up and let her out. Liu Mengyun was completely dazed at the time. She ran out and desperately explained to the Crown Prince, saying someone had knocked her unconscious. But the scene was in utter chaos then, and dead men tell no tales. Where could there be a shred of evidence? The Crown Prince saw the two of us bleeding heavily to save him, and then looked at her completely unharmed. Naturally, the Crown Prince believed she was just dodging responsibility, fearing death and clinging to life, and in front of all the imperial guards, he gave her a harsh slap, angrily denouncing her as a selfish and vile woman.
Hindsight is always 20/20. Hearing this, I only felt a burst of satisfaction in my heart. The suffocating resentment accumulated from my past life seemed to dissipate completely at this moment, along with the aroma of the tea. Sure enough, it takes an evil person to deal with an evil person. To deal with a manipulative woman like Liu Mengyun, who is accustomed to playing the victim and using love to kidnap others emotionally. One must use these even more ruthless and physically undeniable methods that leave her with no way to defend herself. So next, what do you plan to do? I blew gently on the tea leaves and asked calmly. Jiang Ningjin unconsciously caressed her flat abdomen, her gaze becoming extremely deep and ruthless.
Next, we must naturally press our advantage to drive her into a corner where she will act desperately, never to rise again. Sister, Cui Luoyao and I have already spent a fortune to completely bribe 2 imperial physicians of the Eastern Palace. We are currently taking a special medicine that can create an extremely realistic illusion of a pregnancy pulse. We plan to announce to the public that we have both become pregnant with the Crown Prince's flesh and blood at the same time. Not only that, but we also have our trusted maids gossiping outside Liu Mengyun's courtyard all day long, casually gossip, saying that the Crown Prince, out of gratitude for saving his life, and because we both happen to be pregnant, intends to depose her, a sterile Crown Princess, and elevate one of us instead, so that the child can be born with the noble status of the eldest legitimate son. Liu Mengyun was already in a state of extreme panic and paranoia due to losing favor. Now, hearing that we are going to replace her and give birth to the Crown Prince's eldest son, with her narrow-minded and jealous nature, she will definitely lose her composure.
Jiang Ningjin sneered, her tone sounding like an asura from hell.
As long as she dares to take action and plays even the slightest dirty trick in our pregnancy-safe medicine or food, the two of us will immediately react, faking a tragic miscarriage, and firmly pin the blame on her for the crime of harming the imperial lineage. When that time comes, the evidence was ironclad and her caught red-handed, even if the Crown Prince still has feelings for her, even if the Crown Prince wants to protect her. Faced with the monstrous crime of murdering imperial offspring and the thunderous wrath of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, he absolutely will not be able to shield her.
I quietly listened to this interlocking and extremely ruthless scheme. Without saying much, I simply took an extremely precious 100-year-old ginseng from the box beside me. and handed it to her. Prioritize your safety, though acting a part. Do not harm your own physical foundation, I calmly advised. Jiang Ningjin gratefully took the ginseng and nodded heavily. Then, as if she had thought of something, she looked up and asked me with utmost seriousness.
Once Liu Mengyun is dealt with, I want to have a proper contest with Cui Luoyao here in the Eastern Palace. The position of the true crown princess. What do you think?
My hand holding the teacup paused slightly. I had already guessed her thoughts. And it wasn't just her. I also knew all too well that Cui Luoyao of the general's estate, that ruthless woman who didn't hesitate to ruin her own hand to climb the ranks, must be thinking the exact same thing. After all, ambition and greed were etched into their very bones. Utterly impossible to change. But what of it? Cui Luoyao and I had long ceased to care who ruled the Eastern Palace. Once Liu Mengyun, that beloved white moonlight, died, the scales in Pei Yunhe's heart would completely shatter. To balance the political factions in court, he would treat Jiang Ningjin, who came from the chancellor's estate, and Cui Luoyao, who came from the general's estate, with absolute, unbiased equality, just as he had treated Cui Luoyao and me in our past lives, no matter how they fought to the death. In the inner courtyard, Pei Yunhe, in order to win over both families' power, would choose to turn a blind eye and play the part of an exhausted, impartial mediator. Regardless of who lost or won, he would never mistreat the Jiang and Cui families. Our clans would still flourish and prosper, so I did not stop her. Instead, I looked straight into her eyes and reminded her with absolute calm. Ayi, Cui Luoyao and I are now sisters-in-law, and moreover, dearest friends. If you truly want to fight to the death with Cui Luoyao inside the Eastern Palace, as a married daughter, I will not oppose you. But remember, I will absolutely never again use the resources of the Duke's estate or the Chancellor's estate to help you. Your struggle in the Eastern Palaces is your own choice. You must bear all the consequences yourself. Think it through. Jiang Ningjin understood my meaning. She showed no resentment. Instead, with supreme confidence, she nodded hastily.
Fine. Rest assured, eldest sister, my struggle against Cui Luoyao is a private matter of our own abilities, win or lose. I will never implicate you or the Jiang family in the slightest.
After sending away the ambitious Jiang Ningjin, Cui Luoyao came to see me carrying a box of pastries. As expected, when Cui Luoyao returned to the general's estate to visit family, also mentioned her plan to compete for dominance in the Eastern Palace. Cui Luoyao picked up a piece of osmanthus cake, stuffed it into her mouth, and shook her head with a sigh as she chewed.
Jin, you indeed had the foresight to warn me in advance, telling me by no means to stop her and just to let her toss about. But I am just wondering if we could persuade them to get along peacefully and stop in fighting, so everyone could enjoy wealth and honor in the Eastern Palace safely. Wouldn't that be better?
I put down the book in my hand, shook my head, and smiled with deep meaning. Ayao, you think of human nature too simply. First, those who are ambitious and have tasted the sweetness of power cannot be persuaded by us. If you forcibly stop them, not only will they not be grateful, but they will instead resent us for blocking their path to advancement. Secondly, I looked out the window, gazing deeply at the Chinese peonies blooming brilliantly. If we don't let the two of them turn the Eastern Palace upside down and leave no peace, how will Pei Yunhe ever remember the gentleness and goodness we showed him in our past lives? Only amidst extreme pain and exhaustion will he understand that what he lost back then was ultimately what kind of priceless treasure. One afternoon a month later, the sun was burning like fire. Cui Luoyao and I were sitting in the pavilion of the Duke's estate's back garden to keep cool. The brothers Qin Muchen and Qin Muchen, who had just returned from court, didn't even have time to change out of their court robes before they came over together with grave expressions. They brought a piece of news that shook the entire inner palace.
Jin, Yao.
Qin Muchen downed a mouthful of cold tea and lowered his voice to say,
Something has happened in the Eastern Palace. A huge matter. Just yesterday, Liu Mengyun went to visit the pregnant Jiang and Cui, the two side consorts. Less than half an hour after she left, the two side consorts one after another suffered unbearable abdominal pain in their chambers and had tragic miscarriages. The imperial physicians rushed there overnight, and in the 2 bowls of pregnancy, stabilizing tonics personally delivered by Liu Mengyun discovered an extremely large amount of highly potent abortifacient drugs like safflower and musk, enough to be fatal.
The evidence was irrefutable, and she was caught red-handed. The two side consorts, having tragically lost their beloved children, nearly bled to death and cried until they fainted. Qin Muchen let out a sigh. Although Pei Yunhe was nearly broken by this sudden blow, he loved Liu Mengyun to his very bones after all. Under such circumstances, he actually still clung to their past affection, kneeling outside the emperor and empress's palace in an attempt to excuse Liu Mengyun, claiming she was framed and trying to spare her life. But how could the emperor and empress tolerate such a vicious woman who would plot against royal offspring? The emperor was instantly furious, scolding the crown prince for his muddled incompetence. The empress went even further, directly issuing a decree, forcibly stripping Liu Mengyun of her position as the Crown Prince's primary consort, demoting her to a commoner, and immediately throwing her into the imperial prison. Qin Muchen gave a cold snort from the side and chimed in.
That wasn't even the end of it. Early this morning, just as dawn was breaking, the emperor bypassed the crown prince entirely and sent his most trusted head eunuch, bearing a cup of poisoned wine and a 3-foot length of white silk, straight to the imperial prison. In the cell, Liu Mengyun was still crying out, demanding to see the crown prince, refusing to accept her death. Finally, she was pinned to the ground
By several burly senior palace maids,
who used the white silk to strangle her neck and forced her to hang herself to atone for her crime. I heard that. By the time Pei Yunhe received the news and rushed to the prison, Liu Mengyun's body had already gone stiff, holding her cold corpse. In front of all the prison guards, he wept in utter heartbreak and nearly fainted. He didn't even attend the morning court today, shutting himself inside the secret room of the Eastern Palace and refusing to see anyone.
Hearing up to this point, I couldn't help but let out a long sigh in my heart. The Crown Prince truly held her at the very center of his heart, across past and present lives. No matter how many evil deeds Liu Mengyun committed, no matter how selfish and cowardly she was, Pei Yunhe's love for her had indeed not diminished in the slightest. Regrettably, this twisted, indiscriminate favoritism ultimately not only got me killed in my past life, but also brought about Liu Mengyun's own death in this life. Yet Cui Luoyao could not contain her inner satisfaction, slapping the stone table excitedly as she sneered.
Even if she was held at the center of his heart, so what? Are they not separated by death now? She got exactly what she deserved. I'd like to see, now that he has lost this white moonlight, whom he was willing to protect with his life, how our deeply affectionate crown princess will spend the rest of his days facing those two even more ruthless younger sisters.
Time flew by like a fleeting shadow, and in the blink of an eye, several more years had passed. As the days went on, I found myself letting go of the grudges and hatred from my past life more and more. In the Duke's estate, I had a husband who cherished me and a pair of adorable children. Life was peaceful and happy. As for Pei Yunhe, I had long since regarded him as an insignificant stranger. Even during the grand imperial banquets, I would deliberately find excuses to excuse myself or sit in the most remote corner, resolutely avoiding any contact with him, for I felt that, since this rotten thread had already been severed, it should be cut completely clean, leaving not a single trace behind. However, even if I did not go looking for trouble, trouble came looking for me. Sometime later, the old emperor passed away, and Pei Yunhe, as the sole crown prince, naturally ascended the throne as the new emperor, becoming the supreme ruler of the great Qin dynasty, to balance the court and to achieve absolute impartiality. After Liu Mengyun's passing, Pei Yunhe, at his coronation ceremony, made an extremely rare decision. He did not install an empress, bypassing the position of the first wife. He promoted Jiang Ningjin and Qui Luoyao at the same time, putting them on equal footing by conferring upon them the titles of noble consort Shu and noble consort Di respectively, co-managing the imperial harem. However, this superficial balance not only failed to bring peace to the harem, but instead became the fuse that ignited endless warfare. Both Jiang Ningjin and Qui Luoyao were proud and highly ambitious women. Neither was willing to be subordinate to the other, to fight for the vacant throne of the empress, and to give birth to the eldest son who could inherit the throne. The two of them, within the harem, embarked on a decades-long, shockingly cruel infighting. Today, you slip mercury into my food. Tomorrow, I bribed the imperial physician to add sterilizing herbs into your soothing incense. The entire harem was turned into a chaotic mess by them, filled with storms and bloodshed. Those newly entered, young concubines, should they show their faces even slightly and gain some of the emperor's favor, within half a month would either drown mysteriously or suffer a miscarriage and go mad. And the most terrifying part was, in this endless and brutal slaughter, due to the long-term mutual harm caused by various insidious drugs, not only could the other concubines in the harem not bear children, but even Jiang Ningjin and Qui Luoyao themselves had completely ruined their physical constitution, rendering them permanently unable to conceive. Pei Yunhe, this supreme emperor, during the entire 20 years of his reign, was actually left without heirs by these two vicious women, with not a single surviving prince or princess. Yet, worst of all, Pei Yunhe could do nothing about it, because behind Jiang Ningjin and Qui Luoyao stood the powerful prime minister of the court, and the formidable General Qui, who held heavy military power. The factions in court were deeply entrenched and interconnected, where pulling a single thread would affect the whole body. For the stability of the state and the dynasty, Pei Yunhe could only choose to swallow his anger and bear it, turning a blind eye to their wicked deeds. In this manner, he was trapped inside this magnificent golden cage, falling into endless worry and torment. He spent his entire life pursuing what he called true love, and spent his whole life favoring his own biased judgment. But in the end, he lost the wife who truly understood him, lost his beloved white moonlight, and even lost as a man, the most basic ability to carry on his lineage. On New Year's Eve, when he was 45 years old, the imperial palace held a grand banquet. To feast, the officials, Cui Luoyao and I, as first-ranked duchesses, were naturally among the invited guests. At the banquet, Cui Luoyao and I wore our luxurious robes of state, sitting together with our husbands and children, sharing in the warmth and joy, as the entire hall filled with laughter and cheerful voices. Meanwhile, Pei Yunhe, sitting high atop the golden dragon throne, was reduced to skin and bones, with a head full of white hair. He looked a full 10 years older than his actual age. By his side sat the two noble consorts, whose faces were just as haggard, yet they still fought each other with their glares. Just as the drinks were flowing, Pei Yunhe's gaze traversed the crowded palace hall, with an extremely complex and deeply lonely look landing on Cui Luoyao and me, looking at the heartfelt, happy, and content smiles on our faces, and seeing the Qin brothers' natural, completely unguarded consideration and respect for us. Pei Yunhe's hand holding the wine cup began to tremble violently. His eyes turned red in an instant, and a stream of turbid tears ran down his aged cheek, silently sliding down and dripping into his bitter, strong wine. I knew that at this very moment, finally, completely, and with agonizing pain, regretted it to the point of madness. He finally understood that what he had pushed away with his own hands back then were not just two women who were most suited to be his wives, but rather, in his ridiculous life, the only possible chance he had at true peace and happiness. Unfortunately, in this world, there is no medicine for regret. This long and painful rest of his life is the response from heaven for both his past and present lives, for all his bias and cold-heartedness, delivering the most cruel atonement and punishment.